Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello, Commander fans. My name is DJ. This is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and we're talking about Commander 2018, specifically the Bant Enchantments deck. This deck, Adaptive Enchantments, is led by Estrid the Masked. Let's take a look at this awesome Planeswalker. 1 green, white, blue for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. +2, untap each enchanted permanent you control. -1, create a white aura enchantment token named Mask. Attached to another target permanent. The token has enchant permanent and totem armor. -7, put the top 7 cards of your library into your graveyard. Return all non-aura enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, then do the same for aura cards. Estrid the Masked can be your commander. We're going to take the time to break down Estrid the Masked in a lot more detail, but first I want to take a look at the other 2 possible commanders for this pre-constructed deck. We have Kestia the Cultivator. 1 green, white, blue for a 4/4 legendary enchantment creature Nymph. You can bestow Kestia, which means that you can enchant the creature and it'll get +4/+4. Kestia's bestow cost is 3 green, white, blue. Basically that means Kestia can be cast from the command zone, very cool, or your hand I guess, and basically enchant another creature, and it kind of turns into an aura spell. There's some complicated rules around bestow. But it's an interesting mechanic, and we haven't been able to have it in our command zone until now. Whenever an enchanted creature or enchantment creature you control attacks, draw a card. Kestia could give us quite a bit of card draw. It's a very interesting enchantment-based deck. Usually, enchantment deck, you want to have 1 threat, and then you stack a bunch of auras on top of it, and you attack with 1 thing. Or you do a bunch of other dirtily stuff with enchantments. This is one that wants you to have things be enchantment creatures, or have them be enchanted but have a lot of them, so that you can draw even more cards. It makes you go wide. That's super interesting. I don't think we've had an enchantment commander like that. I'm going to touch on some ways we could lean into Kestia, but this is not going to be a Kestia-focused deck. Let's talk about the other possible Bant commander, Tuvasa the Sunlit. Green, white, blue for a 1/1 legendary Merfolk Shaman. We have a Bant Merfolk that no Merfolk player will play because it has no synergies with Merfolk. Okay, Tuvasa the Sunlit gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. That's huge. It could get huge as well because we're going to have a lot of enchantments. Whenever you cast your first enchantment spell, each turn, draw a card. This is the Enchantress effect that we like so much. I'm going to mention other Enchantresses that could easily slot into this deck. So Tuvasa is just a solid Enchantress, even though, well, we can't chain multiple enchantments together and draw multiple cards. That does make me a little bit sad. So if we have a pre-constructed deck with these 3 commanders in it, which one do we choose and how do we build this deck? Well, I'm going to break down this deck with Estrid the Masked at the head. I think Estrid gives us the most potential. The +1 has this untap ability, and that untapping is very unique and very powerful, and I want to take a closer look at that. The -1 ability gives things totem armor. Totem armor basically says that if something were to be destroyed, you destroy the totem armor instead and get rid of all the damage on that creature. Okay, so you can put totem armor on permanents like lands or other enchantments or even your creatures and give it protection. That's very powerful, and it synergizes so well with the untapping. And then the minus ability is a crazy recursion effect that could just win a game. And it's not so far off either. You tick up Estrid twice, and then you can downtick it for an amazing ultimate. So it sounds like there's a lot of potential that Estrid can have, but that isn't in the pre-constructed deck. The pre-constructed deck is all over the place. It shares Estrid's sort of controlling awesome combo strategy with some bestow creatures and some other totem armor and some attacking strategies. You can see how Estrid and Kestia can often be at odds with one another. Kestia wants you to have a lot of creatures, enchant them, enchantment creatures, and attack. Estrid does powerful things if we have enough time to set up some great untap shenanigans. It provides protection, which is solid, and it does some great stuff if we can protect Estrid long enough to -7. That's a pretty sizable ultimate. But it doesn't mean that that way is the only way to build the deck, and so I am going to talk a little bit about auras and bestow, and maybe some ways that you can have Estrid complement Kestio. But the first thing I want to talk about is Estrid specifically and this untapping strategy, because it's amazing. There are a handful of auras that enchant lands to produce extra mana in the pre-constructed deck, but I highly suggest you take a look at Wild Growth, Verdant Haven, Overgrowth, Dawn's Reflection, Fertile Ground, and Market Festival. I like these specifically because they add additional mana to what your land is already tapping for. You can compare that to Weirding Wood, which basically adds another line of text to your land. Enchanted Land has tapped add 2 mana of any one color to your mana pool. This is just preference, and you're going to find it works better, especially if you are enchanting lands that are already very, very good. For example, let's take a look at a few lands I would love to have enchanted and then untap with Estrid. First up, we have a big winner in this deck, pretty obvious for a lot of people, Serra's Sanctum. It's a legendary land, and it adds a white to your mana pool for each enchantment you control. This is going to produce so much mana. So untapping Serra's Sanctum to give you even more mana is going to be huge. Serra's Sanctum is over $100 for this crazy land, so it's not a necessity, but it is very powerful. We don't need Serra's Sanctum. We can have lands like Simic Growth Chamber or Areximanthes Slumbering Isle. Both of these tap for 2, and so if we enchant them, we can untap them and tap them for 2 again. And remember that preference that I had for enchantment auras that added mana when the land was tapped for mana rather than adding another line of text? We can see the advantage that those other auras give in this situation. If we had a Simic Growth Chamber enchanted with Fertile Ground, it would produce 3 mana, and then we could untap it to produce 3 more mana. If it was enchanted with Weirding Wood, well, it could produce 2 mana already, and then Weirding Wood also lets it produce 2 mana. So we could tap it for 2, then untap it, then tap it for 2 again, producing only 4 mana. Although it's a small distinction, I think it's something important to note. By the way, a card like Minamo School at Water's Edge can untap target legendary permanent. Oh, that means it can untap your Serra's Sanctum or your Areximanthes Slumbering Isle, and it might have some other synergies in this deck, who knows. And Magus of the Candelabra gives us another untap lands effect. Redundant effects are going to be really strong in this deck. But it's not just mana we can produce by untapping lands. Let's look at Sunken Field. Enchanted Land has tap, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Keeping this up is so annoying for your opponents, and it's very fun. You can throw it on a land to help you produce extra mana and you don't care about the ability, or force your opponents to play around the threat of activation. Chamber of Manipulation is another enchant land. This is an underplayed card for sure. 2 blue, Enchanted Land has tap, discard a card from your hand, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Oh my gosh, this card is so amazing. Just the threat throws everything out of whack. It's very fun, and trust me, this deck is going to draw a ton of cards because we're going to play a ton of Enchantress effects. So we will have spare cards to discard, and we're just going to mess with combat or steal something great. Now, one thing that's really important to know is that it does not give the creature haste. That's very important. So this is more for messing with everyone rather than it is for creating an alpha strike or winning the game. But it doesn't mean we can't win the game with enchant lands. Let's talk about Squirrel Nest and Spawning Grounds. Spawning Grounds is included in the pre-constructed deck. Squirrel Nest is just a 3-mana enchant land. Enchanted Land has tap, put a 1/1 green squirrel creature token onto the battlefield. Not very powerful. Not even that powerful if we untap it with Estrid. Spawning Grounds, on the other hand, is quite powerful. You get to put a 5/5 beast onto the battlefield with trample. Although 8 mana is a lot to get this going. Squirrel Nest, we know, combos with Earthcraft. Earthcraft is another enchantment. If we needed a deck for where Squirrel Nest was going to be good, it's got to be this deck. Sometimes we just want an enchantment on a land. Like you got your Sarah's Sanctum and boom, you throw a Squirrel Nest on there just to double up your mana with Estrid. But of course, a Squirrel Nest on a basic land with Earthcraft gives you infinite squirrels! Infinite squirrels! And of course, we have other redundant untapping abilities. We already talked about the Magus the Candelabra, but also Fate Stitcher, Kiyora's Follower, Vizier of Tumbling Sands. If we have many things that tap to do great value, then untapping them is going to be even better. And there are a few, specifically wizards, that have powerful tap abilities. Gale Caster Colossus bounces something with a tap. Arcanus the Omnipotent draws you cards, and Kydel, Chosen of Crucifix, gives you crazy amounts of mana. We could have a wizard sub-theme in this deck, where we use the tapping and the untapping and the totem armor to protect stuff. I think that could be a very interesting deck, but it's not what the core of this deck is about. It's really about enchantments, so we'll leave wizards sort of in the back of our minds for maybe a different deck that we go down in the future. Of course, we don't have to be enchanting wizards alone. We can also enchant other permanents. Lands, creatures, artifacts. Gilded Lotus, you can enchant this with a totem armor, and then suddenly we can tap it for 3, untap it again, and tap it for 3 more. That's powerful. Same thing with Mana Vault. We can dodge the downside by using Estrid's ability to untap it, giving us a huge boost of mana. And of course, the artifact that we're all talking about untapping, the Chain Veil. The Chain Veil goes ultimate, especially with all of the mana producers that we have in this category. We can just go off with the Chain Veil. This will allow us to use Estrid's ultimate, which is always a plus, but odds are with all this untapping, we're going to create infinite mana and hopefully we have something powerful to do with it. So untapping is clearly a really strong strategy and we could go down that route, but we have to get back to our roots, our enchantment roots. There's a tremendous advantage to be gained by playing Enchantress, and it comes in most part from the Enchantress effect. All of these let you draw a card when an enchantment is cast or played or entered the battlefield. Enchantress's presence are Gothian Enchantress, Mace Enchantress, Satyr Enchanter, brand new out of M19, Eidolon of Blossoms, Verduran Enchantress. Only 2 of these are found in the pre-constructed deck. That's Enchantress's Presence, again a great reprint, it was over $10, it's an enchantment itself, and Eidolon of Blossoms fits perfectly. It's an enchantment creature. Eidolon of Blossoms draws you a card whenever it enters the battlefield. It doesn't even have to be cast. That's pretty strong too. I think Eidolon of Blossoms is the best Enchantress here, even though our Gothian Enchantress gives them a run for their money because it's only 2 mana and it can't be the target of spells or abilities. It has Shroud. And then Mace Enchantress, Verduran Enchantress, Satyr Enchanter, all of those are just value. We want a critical mass of these. And not to mention the Lieutenant, Tovasa. Tovasa will also draw us a card, and so that should be included in this category as well. These are not the only effects that give us card draw. In fact, enchantments drawing us cards is pretty normal. I don't know how many of them we need, but one I know I want is Search for Azcanta. It is so good. The front side is more card selection than card draw, but we know from our commander's ability to get enchantments back from the graveyard that throwing things in the bin is not a downside. And when Azcanta flips, I know a lot of the time we're searching for instants and sorceries in standard, but it says non-creature, non-land card. That means you can get enchantment after an enchantment by activating Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. This is really a perfect card for this deck. I mentioned Estrid's Ultimate, but there are other cards that simulate this. I mean, Estrid's Ultimate is kind of a Replenish. Replenish is 3 and a white for a sorcery, return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to play. Yes, that is amazing. The downside of Replenish is that it's $70 at the time of recording. I don't even know where this card is going in terms of price. Ugh. Fortunately for us, we can simulate this effect. Open the Vaults is 4 white for a sorcery. It returns all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. This does hit everyone and does hit artifacts, so there is a little bit of a downside, but you can actually use this politically, allowing your opponents to get back things that are necessary to finish out the game. We also have Retether if we're going to go auras. Retether is 3 and a white for a sorcery that says return each aura card from your graveyard to play. This is very powerful if we're going for an aura-based strategy. One thing that kind of sucks though is that we have a lot of auras that enchant lands in this deck, and Retether doesn't work. Unless we actually animate. We could animate a land like a Mutavault or even a Lumbering Falls, and then Retether will pull back all of the auras and enchant that specific land. And then also we have a one-off Nomad Mythmaker, letting us pull auras from our graveyard and attach them to a creature we control. And actually we have other cards that pull things from the graveyard. Hannah Ship's Navigator is a classic, returning target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. And of course we can get a lot of value by using enchantment tutors, getting the exact enchantment we want. Academy Rector is the best, because when it dies, we get the enchantment straight onto the battlefield, cheating its mana cost. And we can get some crazy enchantments out with Academy Rector. Academy Rector is just like Replenish, just like Sarah's Sanctum. It's really expensive, it's on the reserve list. Academy Rector is over $80 now. Ugh. But again, we don't need it. Enlightened Tutor was just reprinted, and it gets any enchantment or artifact card straight on top of your library. We don't need to cheat something huge into play. We have great value at all points in the mana curve. If we're going for auras, there's tons of aura searchers as well. I have opened the armory here because it's super cheap. So remember, you might see these expensive flashy cards, but you don't need them to have a powerful deck. The first strategy with Estrid I want to talk about is Prison. Prison is so much fun. What it does is it prevents your opponents from doing anything. One of the things that your opponents really love to do is attack you. So a card like Propaganda or Ghostly Prison can shut that down, or Sphere of Safety. Sphere of Safety is insane. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Sphere of Safety is one of these things we need to protect because it can just shut everything down. It's so amazing. Of course, there's other effects that punish your opponent from attacking, Archangel of Tides and Norin's Annex, but they're not enchantments, so they're not as good. You know, I jumped right into them attacking you. If we're really going to talk about Prison, I gotta talk about a single card, and that's Stasis. Stasis is insane and miserable, and you're a bad person for even listening to me talk about it. Stasis is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Players skip their untap steps. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Stasis unless you pay blue. Okay, so the way that Stasis works is everything gets shut down, and eventually, because you don't have an untap step either, everything gets crazy. You can't pay its upkeep, and then you gotta sacrifice Stasis. Except Estrid untaps all your permanents, so you'll have your own sort of untap step while everyone else won't have anything. Which means that you can shut everyone else out of the game. I don't think I would play this. I think that people would figure it out after a game and attack you mercilessly, and it also wouldn't be a very fun way to win. But I gotta mention, it's so good, right? It's very good. Maybe you just have a deck that's got some Prison components in it, and then maybe your friend is mean one day, maybe their deck's a little bit too powerful, and then suddenly you bust out Stasis, and then you get to revel in everyone's nothingness. If we're focused on enchantments, we can destroy other decks that are focused on artifacts or creatures. Energy Flux is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. All artifacts gain at the beginning of your upkeep. Sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 2. This destroys mana rocks and taxes some decks out of the game. And also a card like Pendril Mists, 3 and a blue for an enchantment. Each creature gains during your upkeep, pay 1 or bury this creature. This specific list might not benefit from Pendril Mists because we have a lot of Enchantresses, we have a lot of token producers, so it might not be at home in this specific deck. But Energy Flux sounds real cool. I also want to talk about Words of Wind and Words of Waste. Words of Wind reads 2 and a blue for an enchantment. You can pay 1. The next time you would draw a card this turn, each player returns a permanent he or she controls to its owner's hand instead. This seems just okay. You give up a draw, which is a card, okay, and then everyone has to bounce something. That includes yourself. Not very powerful until you combine this with the card drawing power of this deck, specifically when it comes to Enchantresses. Words of Wind can just go off in this deck, especially when you have the ability to produce a ton of mana. You can play enchantments over and over again, drawing cards, and then actually activating Words of Wind so many times you actually make everyone return everything to your hand, and you can just keep playing enchantments and keep drawing cards. Same thing goes with Words of Waste. You waste your opponent's hand in an instant when you have this much card draw. There are tons of enchantments that help control the game. Aura of Silence taxes your opponents, and once you send it to the graveyard to destroy target artifact or enchantment, you can easily get it back again. We also have a card called Humility. 2 white for an enchantment. Each creature loses all abilities and is a 1/1 creature. This shuts down so many decks. Do you have Enter the Battlefield effects? No, you don't. All your creatures are 1/1s. Humility is a crazy card that breaks the rules of the game of Magic. And again, it's another really weird enchantment. It's on the reserve list. It's nearing $50 too, but you don't need it. Okay, Overwhelming Splendor creates a similar effect. Also punishes activated abilities and loyalty abilities. Great for shutting down Planeswalkers. Oh my gosh, we just had a Planeswalker commander set. And it really focuses one opponent because it's a curse. You actually enchant the player, so it doesn't get everyone hating you. It's a pretty solid inclusion. Enchantments are great for a prison strategy because they're able to answer threats in really diverse ways. That's not really seen in the precon, which included 2 of the 3 vows, Vow of Duty, Vow of Flight, Vow of Wilderness. Again, it's an interesting way of answering a threat, but I would prefer cards like Lingify, Darksteel Mutation, Imprisoned in the Moon, or Song of the Dryads. You'll need to answer stuff, and you'll have the answers with this enchantment-based removal. And of course with Prison, you want to shut down the game, but you also want to shut out their ability to interact with you. Privileged Position, Greater Auramancy, and Sterling Grove all help protect yourself. There are a few other ways that you can protect yourself. Cards like Solemnity and Phyrexian Unlife is an enchantment-based combo that sometimes is impenetrable. Your opponents just can't deal with it and you automatically win the game. And of course, Solemnity and Decree of Silence, yeah, that's just going to counter stuff all over the place, just making life miserable for your opponents. And if we want to control the board, Perplexing Chimera is an enchantment creature. Yes! And it does some crazy stuff, letting you exchange it for a spell. This is another level of protection, and if you have a card called Homeward Path to get your Chimera back again, you can just keep stealing other people's spells and keep getting the Chimera back again for value. Now the Chimera is an enchantment creature, and that has me thinking of our other commander, Kestia, the Cultivator, and the aura-based strategy that we could be playing with Estrid. But actually, in recording this, I've realized that I'm not giving Kestia the attention that this awesome bestow creature deserves, so I'm going to save Kestia for her very own deck tech because the strategy is just so different. So I'm going to leave talking about auras to a separate video. There are really too many auras in this deck. We need to cut them down. One thing that the precon does really well is it deploys tokens. I mentioned Squirrel Nest and Spawning Grounds. Spawning Grounds is in this deck, but if we go to some of the other great token producers, Ajani's Chosen and Sigil of the Empty Throne are both all-stars and both featured in the precon. I think if we wanted to supplement this strategy, we can add cards like Sacred Mesa or Luminarch Ascension, so we can use enchantment-based tokens to finish out the game. There are 2 more token makers that are very powerful. The first one is Heliod, God of the Sun. This is so good, especially because it makes 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature tokens. So this means with cards like Eidolon of Blossoms or anything that has the constellation mechanic will trigger from Heliod's ability. And things like Kestia will also trigger because these are enchantment creature tokens. And then we have Sandworm Convergence, an awesome way to shut down the game and win over multiple turns. But speaking of winning, we have a much more powerful way of winning with enchantments. Let's talk about how we end the game with these. One of the most fun ways to end a game with enchantments is to start swinging with them. Opalescence and Starfield of Nyx both turn your enchantments into creatures, making them huge beaters out of nowhere. Opalescence is the better card, but again, this seems to be something I keep repeating. It's on the reserved list. It's a weird enchantment. It's kind of expensive. It's around $20 right now. Starfield of Nyx, again, is the replacement. It's not as powerful, but it's pretty good. I also want to include a card like Parallax Wave, when combined with Opalescence, can just immediately just nuke everyone else's creatures forever. It works by abusing the fact that the taking a fade counter and removing a creature from the game is technically on a separate line of text for returning the creatures to the opponent's control. If you're interested in how this weird interaction works, I have a video where I talk all about it. But really what I want to do is just turn my enchantments into creatures and swing at people. You know, if I can't turn my enchantments into creatures, then maybe I'll just turn everything into enchantments. Enchanted Evening. 3 Azorius. Azorius is either white or blue. For an enchantment that reads, all permanents are enchantments in addition to their other types. Now you might think, that's pretty innocuous, until you combine it with things like Primeval Light, destroy all enchantments target player controls. That just destroys their entire board. How about Spring Cleaning? Destroy target enchantment, clash with an opponent. If you win, destroy all enchantments your opponents control. How about Calming Verse? Destroy all enchantments you don't control. Then if you control an untapped land, destroy all enchantments you control. Okay, I'm not gonna have a tapped land. And then Cleansing Meditation. 1 white, destroy all enchantments. Threshold. By the way, we love throwing stuff into our graveyard, so we'll probably have that threshold. Instead, destroy all enchantments. Then return to play all cards in your graveyard destroyed this way. Oh, Enchanted Evening, you're so weird. By the way, Enchanted Evening with Opalescence will just kill every land because every land is essentially a 0/0 enchantment land creature. Amazing. But by far the most hilarious thing with Enchanted Evening is Aura Thief. 3 in a blue for a 2/2 illusion with flying. When Aura Thief is put into a graveyard from play, you gain control of all enchantments. Just imagine this combo. You suddenly just get to grab everything, all of the lands, every artifact, everything from all of your opponents, just arrange them all on your board. They'll probably scoop, but I mean, come on. They'll probably hate you for at least the next 3 games. It is a combo totally worth pursuing. And finally, I have the most epic win condition, Enduring Ideal. It is a sorcery with epic. 5 white for sorcery, search your library for an enchantment card and put it into play. Then shuffle your library. Epic. For the rest of the game, you can't play spells. At the beginning of each of your upkeeps, copy the spell, except for its epic ability. This is a very dangerous sorcery, but it's very fun to say, look, I'm done with the game, I'm just gonna keep pulling out enchantments over and over again. But you know what? If you have the game locked up, if you have everyone imprisoned, and you have privileged position or greater oromancy, you have all sorts of levels of protection, you have solemnity or decree of silence, you have all of this stuff, then maybe this is just a way to close out the game. This has been a long video because there's so much to talk about with enchantments, and I honestly didn't even get to everything. I've left stuff out. It's crazy because this is something we've wanted for so long, and Estrid is so interesting and powerful. It protects stuff. It has untapping synergies. It has an amazing replenishability as an ultimate. But unfortunately, the pre-constructed deck is disjointed. It's all over the place. It has some powerful commanders, but not the support they need. I gave Estrid the support she needed to be an awesome commander deck today. And in the future, I'm going to take a look at Kestia to make sure that we have another amazing Bant commander. I want to thank you all for watching, and specifically, I want to thank TCGplayer.com. They sponsored the entire Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and if you click in the link in the description, you can buy any card from Commander 2018 from them. Don't like the entire pre-constructed deck? Get the singles you want. I want to thank my patrons who support me. Thank you. You are a part of Jumbo Commander, and a big reason why we have so many videos coming out. Thank you, patrons. If you want to be a patron, go ahead and check out patreon.com/jumbocommander. Thank you very much for watching. There will be more videos, so many more videos, all on Commander 2018. Thank you, and see you very, very soon.